right, so we're running because okay. So Matthias, you reached out to me. From what I understand, something to do with starting an estuary, um, and that's kind of all I know. And I kind of wonder why you
Yeah.
want to talk to me because I haven't been particularly vocal or positive about the ideas of estuary.
Yes, you're already recording, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, I reached out to you because you're the kind of the pastor of the Discord. And yeah, you like Dave and I, we before Paul started to talk about the estuary, we were planning to do something to have some kind of meetup where we where we have these conversations that we are having for I think half a year now or something like that. And you immediately came to my mind because you are used to do podcasts with Discord people. And Dave and I, we talked about this for weeks, but I think it would be good to have this kind of format to flesh out our ideas a little bit better. And you are a good listener and a good moderator, and that's why I reached out to you to help us flesh out our ideas. Yeah, if you still like to do this, then it would be great. If not, we can just stop it now.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm always willing to hear people's ideas or what they're trying to work on. I mean, first of all, to want to do this in the current climate is kind of interesting because, I mean, the offline meetups I had are pretty much dead in the water right now. So what is your plan? Are you just kind of trying to figure things out and then start it once the crisis is over, God willing, or like what's the plan?
Well, the plan is we said maybe beginning next year, and of course this depends on the situation around. But yeah, I think I should go some steps back and explain how the two of us connected, because I think that's an interesting story. So yeah, some people of the Discord may know me. Recently I'm more a lurker. I used to be more active in the past. But yeah, I'm this classical coming from atheism through John Peterson, learning about the Bible, and then finding Paul van der Klee, finding the Discord. So this is my classical journey. And yeah, what can I say? Most of my teenage and adult life, I considered myself an atheist. And yeah, when Peterson came out with the biblical series in 2017, I was hooked immediately, and my friends always watched the newest Netflix episodes, and I watched biblical series on my own and had no one to talk to, you know. And then of course it was great to find Paul van der Klee, listening to him, but I still didn't have anyone to talk about these topics. And then it was great that the Discord formed. But I always felt that I need to have something in my real life, some people to talk about this and to embody it more. I don't know. And this is also the idea how the Discord started, right? I mean, they started from this Jordan Peterson meetup in Sacramento, and they always said, okay, we do this in the digital realm, but ideally all of you should get together and start your own meetup.
That was the plan. Yeah,
right.
And it worked a couple times. Like we met in Frankfurt, and you know that worked out well. But yeah, then COVID.
Exactly. And at the same time, I always looked around in my life. Are there people I can talk to this? And sometimes I got some people. Okay, they knew about Peterson, but they were only interested in this political topics, you know. But no one really in this religious stuff. And at that time, I met David from time to time when I went to work in the train, and we kind of knew each other, because this is the interesting thing. I grew up in a Mennonite community next to Heidelberg, Germany. Mm-hmm. And I was brought up religiously, but as I said, from the age of 13, I had my doubts, and then soon I saw myself as an atheist, and most of my adult life, as I said. And then I saw David in the train. I thought, maybe he knows Peterson. I don't know. He's an American. He's a Christian. He's also quite current. He knows how to use social media. So maybe he has heard of him. And then one day I wrote a WhatsApp message to him and said, "Hey Dave, have you heard of this psychologist from YouTube? This John Peterson guy?" And he said, "Yes, of course. I know him. Let's meet and talk about him." And so I just looked this up this evening, and it was in August 2019 when I messaged you.
So a year
ago.
Wow.
And then we started to meet in a bar every now and then, and it was just really just going, and we talked for hours. And this took some months, and we developed some ideas. And then David one day said, "Hey, let's start a group, let's start a meetup or something." And I think 2 weeks later, Paul van der Kuyk came with his estuary concept. And yeah, I mean, you said you are not so much into estuary, but we are not certainly only following this estuary idea of Paul van der Kuyk, but we have our own ideas. And yeah, and I want to ask you, David, how did you experience our connection, how it started? And maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit to the Discord community.
Well, I'll first tell the story from my side how we met.
Yeah.
Because I knew that you had lived in Mannheim, which is a fairly large city. We're 350,000. And I think we met one time in the bus. And then I remember seeing you again in the bus. It was random. And I like to listen to podcasts. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go over and talk to Matthias. And I took out my earbud, and then we started talking, and we talked about your brother.
Yeah.
And we talked about being parents, and I thought, that was a really neat conversation. And then you wrote me a few days later.
Yeah.
For me, it was completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
You know Jordan Peterson or something like that. And I had just maybe been like full Peterson for like a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I had not talked about it with anybody. I was just like binge watching and like, what? It just discovering
it just started.
Discovering it, and bugging my wife about it, and and he writes me, and I was like, yes, yeah, you know him? Like, I hadn't met anybody else and so that was how that started, and that nice. Caught me completely. I would say quite serendipitous, because the irony of it is I had to get my podcast out, probably listening to Peterson or something, and then yeah. I have a long background, but basically I grew up as a missionary kid. So I was born in Munich, Germany. My parents did work in starting new churches in Munich, and then we went to Perth, Australia. We lived there for a number of years. And I was first 12 years old when I moved back to the US. So I have quite a different experience than many, but grew up in a church context that was very different than most people, because they were always trying new things out. They were always trying to figure out how to connect with people. And so that just meant our living room was where people from any kind of people were always coming to meet with my parents and hang out. And so church for me was just as much around, like, especially in Australia, around the barbecue as much as it was sitting in a sanctuary or something like that. So as a young man, I came to Germany to do voluntary service. I had finished college. I remember deciding very clearly that I was not a Christian, that I could not claim that at that point before, as a few years before I came to Germany, and was really on the search for what that meant. And that community he mentioned played a big role in my life. It was an intentional community where they did life together. And you had grown up as a child of one of the couples that had lived there. So I only remember you vaguely from that time. I was a volunteer. You were a few years younger, and you were also quite, well, you didn't really live there at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, so our paths crossed a long time ago, and then it just happened that our paths crossed again in Mannheim probably about 15, 18 years later. So quite unique, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and now, especially on the whole Peterson connection point, that just as you were getting into it, he was trying. So this happens a lot on the Discord. I found that people show up and they say, well, I've gotten really into Peterson evangelically, and I have nobody to talk about these things, and I'm really struggling with meaning or with family problems or relationships, and Peterson's been really helpful, but nobody around me knows him. And in that sense, the idea of the estuary, if it's supposed to fill that need, it could really take off. I guess when it comes to estuary, I'm just kind of wondering what makes it different from a meetup. But
yeah. I'll give a little bit more context maybe to why we're thinking about this. I work, my wife and we're starting a new church project here.
I missed a bit of a part where you went from atheism to wanting to start a church with your wife.
Well, I never say that I was atheism. I remember establishing for me, I knew that I wasn't Christian. And that was more that I didn't take on that commitment versus rejecting that commitment, I think. And that was trying to be authentic to that. It took me, because I went through then a fairly, I was involved in a Christian community quite often and did like voluntary service with a Christian organization and all that. But I often came at it much more skeptical and critical than a lot of my many others, and yet not rebellious. I was not just throwing it out the window. And many other people, just if you were critical, you would just leave. And I stayed, but needed to answer a lot of questions. It wasn't until I was later in life, 27, that's when I decided that I could commit to that. And that took me on a trajectory there then where I did seminary studies and did church work. We came initially to Germany as a pastor with my wife. And then we have always been interested in starting new projects and being much more, well, how do we think about the church of the future rather than the one that has in the past. And so part of our conversations is that we have a lot of freedom and space to kind of explore with things. And I've always felt more drawn anyway to that, like there's got to be some kind of space where we can more in an authentic way and in a real way and talk with people about things that are important because and have to do with meaning, because it's very hard to do that within a Christian culture and context that often doesn't give that as much space for people to explore that initially.
They want to bring in Jesus too quickly, or
maybe, or we just have our maybe it's not even that. It's just that maybe the people that's not what they're looking for. And there's often such a specificity to the culture way to participate in it, that it's very religious in its overtones. Or, for example, I would say the classic way is if you want to have somebody learn about what it means to be religious or to be Christian, you invite them to your service. And there is a lot to learn right there, but then that's often not a great place to engage people in conversation right away, right?
Sure.
And sometimes there's a lot of learning that can take place before that. And I think we act sometimes, if we're coming from the church perspective, as if people, well, we live in very much a subculture, and yet we don't know how to relate to the broader culture. And our rituals and our community life and all of that is quite is a nuanced and an acquired taste for many people. And we don't have space even within our community life or church life where there's more openness of just how to connect with everyday people. So that's been one of our approaches, is to name things of what people that are taking part in our church. Look, when we do a board game night, just show up and be part of the board game night, but we want to count this as part of our church life, because this is how we also relate to other people in our lives. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that lacks some sense of cohesion and deeper exploration of where people are at in life, and especially how they think about life and understand it. Yeah.
It can be an entry point, a board game night.
Yeah. Yeah. I love board games, so.
Yeah, I like it. That's actually not even a bad idea. The way to get people kind of get to know each other over a board game or something like that. I mean, in a way I tried an estuary. Feels so long ago. It's probably not even more than, well, it is more than half a year ago. This was like way pre-COVID. I think it was in like October or November last year. Talked to my pastor, said, hey, how about we do something like this, where people who are like me, who are kind of on the edge, can come together and talk. And he loved that idea, and to him that was like, okay, that's also a missional thing that we fulfill that way, so that's all good. And I said, okay, I'm a volunteer firefighter, so I can just make use of the fire department, and that way it wouldn't be in the church, so it's like it's a safe space. And we had three editions. First time 3 people showed up, second time 2 people showed up, and the last time just one guy showed. No, hang on, I'm wrong. First time 1 guy showed up. Second time he brought a friend, and somebody else came, and so we were with the 5 of us. My pastor was also there, and then the third time I think only 1 guy showed up. The second was definitely very good. Like, people really opened up, and I was really back then into, I want to talk about, can we know objective morality, and that was sort of that nice, easy subjects. But they just want to talk about what's it like to be a good father, what's it like to be a, like a pillar in your community. There was this guy who ran a shop where they fix what's the English word for that? Like scooter bikes, the little 2-stroke engine scooter bikes. And he had this kid working for him. It's like, 17, 18-year-old kid. Kid didn't know how to tell time on his wristwatch. Only digital, no, he didn't even know how to do it digitally. So what the owner would do, I mean, I just love telling this story. He said, okay, I want these and these and these scooters cleaned or washed by 4:00. Okay, so the kid's like, 4:00. Okay, that's 1600, right? Yeah, that's 1600. Okay. And then he wouldn't tell him when it was 4:00. He'd just kind of, show up, say, okay, is it done? He wouldn't tell him, I keep a track of time. So the kid taught himself to keep time, just so the kid would be a good employee. And he took it, so the owner kind of instilled a sense of responsibility and meaning into the, I said, you've given this kid something really important. Like, he's going to have this with him probably for the rest of his life. You showed that you would trust him, and he got to improve himself. So, I mean, as far as the estuary that we tried went, that was very, very, very much what I hoped it could be. The main problem we had is that we didn't know how to find the people. So we, I hung some posters up in the supermarket. I thought of hanging them up in the library. It's like, you don't know what sort of people are looking for this, and you don't know where they are. So we did have a little thing in a local newspaper, but yeah, I did not get the impression that it spread very far. And I thought maybe in retrospect I would have done something in meetup.com, but then you're also fishing in a limited pond, because, well, who goes to meetup.com? Well, younger people in general, kind of tech savvy people, maybe. So, I didn't try again because I figured, well, I'd probably have the same problem again, and I'd at least want to sort of know how to reach more people. And maybe there just weren't enough people in my 24,000 population village who were particularly interested in this. I mean, I do live in the Bible Belt. It's not like there's not enough places where you can have discussions, but they tend to be, at least if not religious, very religion adjacent. And we want to talk about meaning and philosophy and, basically the stuff that Peterson kind of shook awake in us. And yeah, so I wonder what your intended approach is on how to find the ponds in which to fish.
I had a question because you organized some meetups, right?
Mm-hmm.
For that was all pre-COVID.
Yeah.
How did that go? How did you did that through Meetup?
No, it was all organic, just flyers, newspaper. Yeah, so that's all we had. I didn't go to meetup.com because I figured that's too limited a source.
Did you also invite people directly? Where you said maybe this guy, this friend or so.
My pastor did, and
okay.
I mean, I don't like to be honest. I don't think anyone showed up because of the posters. I think it was all mouth to mouth.
Yeah.
But then, whenever we'd start, my pastor would say, "Okay, I'm a pastor, but this is not a religious thing. This just, Job's organized this, yada yada yada." Because, well, as soon as a pastor asks you, "Hey, do you want to come to my cool meetup?" You're like, no, you're gonna smuggle Jesus to chance at first chance you get. So, yeah, that's kind of risk we had, and I think maybe that's why we didn't have such a turn up. And I was kind of hoping that people would bring friends, and the second time they did, but what will keep them coming back? And I mean, to his credit, Paul did something very simple. He just put his name up on meetup.com because John van Dark badgered him into doing it. And 12 people showed up.
Yeah, I mean, this also was due to the name Jordan Peterson meetup and due to the time, right?
And I was a bit, how do I say that? Reluctant to associate with Jordan Peterson's name, because every time I bring up, I like Jordan Peterson, people are kind of like, oh, so you're a fascist? No.
Yeah.
I also think that, well, we are in Mannheim, Germany, and I don't really think that Jordan Peterson, people don't know him here.
No.
Yeah.
That also, yeah.
So I think it wouldn't help to begin with. So.
Oh, is that psychologist who cries a lot? Yeah.
But you did organize a Jordan Peterson meetup in Frankfurt, right? Or you were part of that?
I was part of that. Yeah. But that was out of the Discord.
Yes.
So
it was all Discord people.
Yeah, people were already connected digitally. So
we had the Europe channel on the Discord server, and we just kind of said, okay, let's get this done. It was a guy from Frankfurt, so I just took the train there. I got to stay over at his house. Next day, some other guy I knew from the Netherlands who I'd met before.
Props to Andreas, by the way.
Yeah. Echt wunderbar. He did a great job. And he was, I don't know, I really like Andreas, so I'm biased, but he opens his house to us, so a bunch of weird ass strangers, and it worked out really well. So I stayed over at his place. Then the next evening we went for this large walk. Ferdy showed up from the Netherlands early in the morning. He drove 4 hours to get there. And then we got contacted by somebody else saying, oh, I'm from, I think it was from Würzburg. He says, oh, I'll show up. And we met with him at Frankfurt Station. And then we just kind of started walking, like the four of us. That's simple. Like, okay, let's see if we can find a good path to walk down. And we ended up on part of the Camino that goes all the way to Spain. And we just sort of walked and chatted and got lost. And And then we stayed over. We had dinner. We stayed over the night. but it was really good. We had, just these people, we didn't know each other, I guess, superficially, but the guy who showed up at the train station, none of us knew. And we just talked about, we'll get you into Peterson, and how's your family, doing? And we talked about, well, depends if this, I can talk about my own experiences. Like, okay, we talked about family relationships, and like I have an estranged sister, and part of that conversation made me get into contact with her again. And now we're slowly rebuilding contact, and that's partially because, those other guys really encouraged me to, like, that's your family. You got to get back into contact. You got to, you got to forgive. And that was just, it was really useful. I would have loved to do it again. Like Matthias, you at some point come up, let's say, let's do a monastery retreat. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would have loved to do that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah, good to hear. I mean, like, let's talk about our context. Of course, Peterson doesn't work, and we already thought about how to approach people. And our plan was, we already have some ideas who we would invite for the first session. So I think we would start with inviting some friends.
Yeah.
And just build some core group and meet regularly and try to establish relationships and good conversations. I think that's our plan, right?
I think, and I think the genesis of our idea a little bit was there. In German, there's a concept, but it's a practice. I don't know, a cultural thing called a stammtisch. Might have something like that in the Netherlands. A stammtisch, a stamm would be like a stump, right? Or like a the trunk of a tree, like the
stem.
Yeah, and then a tisch is a table. So at many restaurants and bars and stuff, it's almost like a cultural thing. You can organize a stammtisch. It would be like a regular meeting of people that will show up to a specific table at a specific time on a specific day, and they just, every 2 weeks or every week, it's this core group that meets. And we had started talking about that, like trying to organize a stammtisch. And then I think as the more we talked, we it developed into this idea of like, well, what space are we working with? And that's where we started talking about the idea of like, what's the fourth space? Because you have most people spend their time working with family, those two spaces. And then what's a dominant priority too in our culture is the Freizeit, like your free time, what you do with your interests, your hobbies, your outside of work and home life. What do you give yourself to? And that is something that everything really shapes a lot of people's social relationships. And that's like a third space in some ways. It used to be occupied by religion. That would have been the kind of social interaction outside of those other two places, but that doesn't exist anymore. So now it's like the clubs, like your biking club or your bird watching or what, all the,
because so to poke at this, you're looking for people who don't already have this.
Well, we talked about a fourth space. There's a space that, because those, I think hobby gives people meaning in some ways, but it also, by definition is still a pastime. And we wondered if there is an idea of like, is it attractive to people to have some other kind of space where you're talking about meaning in life and trying to form that? And that's something that we thought had captured our attention, that there, maybe that is a digital space. I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out a little bit. But many people don't, at least in their home or in their work or even in their pastime, you don't sit around and talk about a lot of meaning.
Yeah. It's not getting very deep usually.
So you're looking for the people who Yeah, because I've had people show up at the Discord where, like literally bursting at the seams. So just to like, can I talk? Sure you can. Let's talk. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it'd be great if there was a place for them where they could meet like-minded people. I mean, I've wondered a lot, like what makes the Discord work and how do people find it? And usually it's the same pattern, like Peterson, Van der Klee, Discord. Yeah. And so we have the YouTube algorithm to thank for a lot of that. It's true. I mean, as much as we are horrified by documentaries like The Social Dilemma, there is some good to be said for those suggestive algorithms, because people like you like this, so you might like it. Oh, turns out I do. Where am I going with this? I don't know how to do that offline.
Yeah.
I don't. I'd have to go like, where are people like me hanging out? Well, at home. I can't just go knock on people's doors. Hello, are you looking for meaning? Yeah, put it in the hallway. Like that's the difficult part. So I mean, what you're saying, like we're just gonna basically approach our existing friends. Yeah, that could work, but I don't know how you're going to reach the people who are outside your network that you don't know about. That's the most difficult part, and YouTube allowed that to get people to connect who would otherwise perhaps not have connected.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't figured this out completely, but we also thought about some digital arm of this project, but that's not, at least we initially thought about it, but we haven't sketched it out. Yeah, and
stammtisch could work. I mean, it could certainly be a catalyst for more, but then, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the people who would show up at the stammtisch, you'd have to ask them like, who do you know who think would be also interested in this? And you'd be willing to join this place. Yeah,
true. But I'm also, well, I can speak for me. I'm not so concerned with growing this as fast as possible. I'm interested in building a long-term group, maybe even institution for this. And if we have, I don't know, 10 to 15 people or something like that, I would already be satisfied. And I think this is a project that can take years.
Yeah.
And we also have to explain more about space, right? I mean, what's our plan, where we want to do this? I mean, Stammtisch is only the concept.
Yeah.
We have some other ideas for the place that's connected to church also, right? Can you say something about that?
What did you...
Your ideas in the north of Mannheim, like
Schönau?
Yeah.
I think I'll get to Schönau because that's a good, I think that's a good point.
All right.
I think as somebody who's starting basically in the field of church planning, right? We are starting a new community, and that means we've always started with this idea of we're not here just to start a new worship service and invite all the Christians to that. We want to live out authentic lives and have that be represented in the way we live our lives and the way we do that in our neighborhood, and have tried to do that from the beginning in our church work. So for me, there is a mode of life where I know many people. In fact, most of the people I relate to have nothing to do with anything religious, but have, I think, yearned to have some kind of space where I can say, look, I participate in this Stammtisch, in this conversation or whatever. Do you want to come and share your story? Because I know that you have a lot to say about either this experience in your life or this. And we sit there, we basically talk about the meaning of life or whatever. And so there is a space that I would like to invite to. So I'm saying it serves my purpose as somebody who is actually involved in church work, which I don't see the natural invitation being, come to our gathering where we read the Bible together and where we sing and such.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mode that I'm in anyway that I wish I had something like that, where there would be more open exchange, and there was just part of what we did as a group. We'd say, look, we're gonna share our stories or whatever. And I think that would be a natural way, because that's just the way I am. I know many people, and I'm often in conversations, and I just don't have that kind of place. We are involved in another project. This has to do with we work with an organization that does more social work and such. And we're starting in partnership with the Protestant church here in Mannheim. We're opening a community center, and it's going to be a family cafe. And it's in a poorer part of town in Mannheim, where there's more social problems, more unemployment and such. And so we have access to kind of one of these spaces, which is supposed to be a community center anyway. And so this would be an interesting thing to run at a community center, and it would kind of fit in with that, what's already trying to take place, which is bringing, it's like in German, say a Begegnungszentrum, like a place where people encounter each other. So there is some natural folding in on itself of like where this might work in the way I'm working in my other areas of my life. And so that's why I think we've gotten more concrete, like how do we make this look, who can we invite, what is possible, because let's say, just as somebody who is trying to figure out how do you how do you live faith relevantly in a culture like this today, and what do people see from the outside in there? How do you connect with people in general about religion? It's just a huge obstacle, right? And so that's the same conversation when we're talking about how do you start an estuary, which isn't even explicitly running with any kind of dogma or doctrine of any site. It's the same barriers, the same problems of how do you get into that private sphere with people, which especially, in Germany, I would say, that is the sphere we don't share with people we don't know, right? And that's always the case, right? Yeah. So there's a couple of things going on, and so I would say I'm involved in community building as a way of trying to figure out, that's my work in so many ways. So I see this as one more element to that I would get excited about. Yeah. But it's extremely challenging. Yeah. We thought, I think the algorithm in the human in the real world, I love that metaphor, because I think YouTube and Google does a lot of work for us when it comes to connecting, right? Connecting people. In the real world, it's relationships and mouth to mouth. Like that's the best algorithm there is, and we try to bypass that somehow, or we think that there's other ways, but that is just, at the end of the day, that's why people show up, because they know somebody that knows somebody type of thing. And that's hard to get that algorithm even to work. And I think it's or
you gotta have the people who are very high in openness. Yeah. And I walked into a church because there's a big banner outside, like, come walk in, like, okay. So I walk in, like, who does that? So,
yeah.
But I used to do that on meetup.com. I'd get these meetups suggested, but again, there's an algorithm at work saying, oh, you might like these meetups, and they're in your neighborhood. So I'd show up, and I'd be usually tech related or whatever. But again, there's an algorithm in place, and if I hadn't known there was a meetup, I wouldn't have gone. So I like your idea of the community center in Mannheim. Was Mannheim, right?
Yeah.
that sounds like that could really work out if that then is already an established sort of known area, known building. Like, oh, that's where people come together for different reasons because different how do you say that? Different organizations use it. Like it's a common area. Like the place my church has down the street, they offer their space sometimes for non-church related things. So yeah, that could work out. I mean, you guys clearly have a long-term goal for this, or you're in for the long haul. It doesn't need to happen next week. Maybe that's a mistake I made. Like, okay, this didn't work out. I gotta lick my wounds and see what else I can try. But I'm not gonna run straight into that wall again.
Well, I think there's such a rush initially. Okay, I mean, this is my experience of going with Peterson is that, you know, I probably spent 2 to 3 solid months of like, that's just what I did in my spare time and like soaked it in. I should say a little bit to my background, maybe why it sat with me so much is that I went to, coming from the Mennonite background, we've always had a emphasis on peace. And I even did peace studies as my bachelor that was offered by a Mennonite university.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Justice and peace, you know, and so I did that at the end of the 90s. I graduated 2000 from a bachelor's program. And I was the fringe person in that program because I didn't want to throw out religion. I didn't want to throw I again, like I said, I didn't rebel. I was resistant, but I stayed with things. And I was the one who was always like, hey, I think you guys have some good idea, but aren't you going a little bit far with this? Like you're just going. And when I started listening to Peterson, and we all know the way justice and peace has taken on a lot of traction in the broader culture, and especially when you would say in more recent times, the more awareness around the I would say the transformation of culture in terms of like let's get rid of racism and let's the gender, the identity politics or whatever. All that stuff I had been involved in 20 years ago, right? And just could see the connection that goes way back. And when I started listening to Peterson, I was like, oh, I've been trying to figure this out for like 20 years, and suddenly click, you know, just when he started expressing things, I didn't know you could say it that way. And it's like, you're right, you know, and like it was like a lightning bolt because it just spoke so relevantly to where culture had been going. And I had been in the heart of it 20 years ago. You know, basically all the people that I graduated with turned, you know, are activists now. And I'm not saying that as a dirty word. I'm just saying that was the trajectory of how you engaged with culture, right? And how you wanted to change it and transform it. And the baselines for what were truth and all that, you know, you would take down this truth and you would replace it with this. And I always said, we're just switching something around here. And yet nobody's talking about it in those terms. And I think Peterson helped me see that more clearly. And it just was, anyway, so that was my background coming from the peace and justice side of things and saying, whoa, what's this? Yeah, this is always the critique I felt like I had. And he just articulated it better. Yeah.
I could just hear Peterson like, well, that's what the postmodernists did. They would just switch out one truth for another. You can't do that. It's not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, are you concerned with Peterson's moment sort of having, you know, Peterson is receding, which is probably good for his health. All power to the guy. But are you, I don't know, are you planning on still approaching this from that sort of Petersonian angle without mentioning Peterson? Or, because I mean, I've considered like, well, what if I tried this again and I would say, okay, we're going to work through 12 rules for life. We meet once every 2 weeks or whatever, and we take a rule apart. Okay, like how do we what do we think about that, or something related, like something about Dostoevsky or whatever, without turning it into a book club, because then it turns into a book club. And how are you seeing that?
Well, do you want to give your experience with your family?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is I'm doing a 12 Rules project currently with my dad and my brother, where we read through the whole 12 Rules thing, and it's really, I cannot articulate how helpful it is. And I tried this because, I mean, you know this, a lot of people, a lot of guys said, I read this or I gave this to my father and it improved our relationship just so much. And that's why I came to the idea to try it with my dad and my brother. And I told David before, and he said, oh, really? Okay, maybe start with, is it really a good idea to start with both of them, or do you want it better do it individually? And I thought, okay, let's try it. And we start, and it's just going so well. It's really good. But coming back to your question.
Whoa, hang on. No, not so fast.
Yeah.
How did they respond the first time you brought this up?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's also very interesting because my brother, he said, wait a minute, what's your plan? Where do you want to go with this? Who's this strange guy? So what do you want to do with us? So are you up to something? What's really behind this? And he was quite suspicious. And my dad also, he said yes, because I think he really wanted to connect to us more, because we had also some difficult years before. Also, I mean, there were really some conflicts where we didn't speak to each other for years.
Oh, wow.
And, but I mean, this is just true. I mean, what all, especially young men say, it's just true with Peterson. It helped me so much. And also approaching them and also answering their critical questions. I had learned enough of Peterson to do this constructively. And we are now in chapter 4, and it's just getting better every time. And they are really into him. And my father even, the other day, he came to me and said, maybe I should give this book to this old friend, because he's really into, I don't know, Verschwörungstheorien, conspiracy theories, and he's having a hard time, and maybe he needs some basic rules, and I give this book to him. And so it's just a miracle, really, how well this works. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, man.
Yeah,
that's really good.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think, because you said earlier, like in the German speaking world, like Peterson just isn't really a known entity.
Yeah.
And part of what you're doing with your brother and your dad is, I mean, it's kind of besides the idea of you like read this book, which is always, like there can be walls, but they're not throwing up walls to Peterson per se, and maybe the whole conversation around what he's involved in, right? They're just like, what do you mean? What are you trying to foist a book on me? Like, he's just so unknown that there's almost a positive in that. Like,
could be,
I don't know, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and the fact that it was approached as, let's read it together.
Exactly.
Let's engage over this content. That was probably really, really helpful. Huh. Yeah, no, that has me going like, I wonder who I could do that with. But like, not my dad. I think.
I can really recommend it. It's really, I mean, I don't know how it is to read it with your mother. I don't know if that's a good idea. But with my dad and my brother, it worked out well. Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. Must have been when I just had gotten into Peterson. I was visiting my parents, and I said, hey, Dad. And my dad was a teacher, and he visited like Afghanistan in his 70s, and, had a big beard. I said, hey, Dad, have you ever heard of this guy called Solzhenitsyn? My dad walks to his study, comes back with this 70 edition of Gulag
Gulag
Archipelago.
Gulag
Yeah,
Archipelago.
like this thick. Like here,
Great.
you know, there's already like 3 other books by the guy. Like how, like what's wrong with me that I don't know my father at that level?
Yeah.
Why did you not? Why did we never?
Yeah.
So
Connect. I remember my parents used to have Solzhenitsyn in their bookshelf as well.
Yeah. No, but I think there's one more principle I think I want to draw out of this, because we talked about essentially how easy it is to connect online and how difficult it is to connect in person. And they're completely different mediums. And I think we forget that sometimes, that it's that one person that you put the book in their hand. That's the way it works in real life, and not you press publish, and then 1,000, you know, the whole world could theoretically read your post or whatever. I mean, and I think that there is a certain, that's the patient approach. It's fine if it's just one person. Like that's way more meaningful, and I think that's the conversation you can have with one person. And it's not so much about all of Mannheim. It's like, who are those handful of people that we can do that with, and then in a way offer space so that they can do that in their lives with others. I mean, that's way more the way that spreads than just
I think, like, really my idea is really to build a core group and to build an institution, and maybe, I don't know, maybe half a year later we start a podcast to have a digital reach to people, or do a Facebook page, or I don't know, just experiment, or maybe we need an internal Discord server where we can continue to have our conversations when we don't meet. I don't know. I think this has to be figured out, but I think the first step would be to get this going. We have an idea for space. We have the first idea for some people to invite. And I think, one thing for me is also, I mean, I want to bring this from the digital realm into my real life and also into my mother tongue, you know. I want to do this in German. And
sorry, that's reflex. Okay, yeah.
No, honestly, I also when I write in German, and I also want to, I mean, you're a model in this as well sometimes, Joe, because you're journaling and stuff like that, and I want to start journaling and maybe blogging, because I think I really have to go through these ideas again when I first encountered Peterson and how it changed my life, how I also this book project with my dad and brother, and everything I went through. I have to reflect on that more, and I think I have to write about that, but also talk about it with real people. And so
Have you done the self-authoring program?
Well, I was the guy who started the self-authoring project on the Discord.
I was just going to say, because on the Discord we actually did a self-authoring. Sorry,
But
that was a great idea.
But I haven't finished it yet, to my shame. But this really got me going, and I had to solve some problems first in my work life and so on, and now I'm ready to finish it. So this was a good start. I was there in for some weeks, and I really went through some of the programs, but I haven't finished yet. So that's my homework still.
Yeah, but also doing that with a group of people where, you know, it's okay to only say, I did this and I wrote my things and I'm not going to share any of it. I'm just here to listen, and other people are willing to share. That worked really well. And because you kind of get to go through that sort of shared suffering and recollection thing. And I think that's really powerful. But again, you got to find the people who are willing to do that. So much of what Peterson said is fundamentally about relating. It's like you stand up, you make yourself vulnerable, you deal with people, whether they're good or bad for you. You act towards people in the long haul. You don't go for the quick wins or the manipulation. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. Lost it, but I don't know.
At first you were irritated because I said I want to do this in German.
Just making a stupid joke. I think it could work in German, but I have heard some bad things about the German translation of 12 Rules. I don't know if those are...
No, you didn't understand me correctly. My dad and we are reading it in English. But we talk German. Of course, we talk German, but we read English. No, I want to. I need a German-speaking estuary group and a German-speaking community, because it's my mother tongue and I can process things way better in German. That's my point.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't see why that would be an issue. Also makes it more accessible to people.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. I think with Peterson, it's also sometimes it's the speech barrier for German.
Well, that's the thing, and I was going to say there's the translation.
Yeah, it's a bad translation.
What I mean is there's a yearning to have that translated not only into your mother tongue, but into the experience into your German experience, and that you can only do that with other Germans then.
Exactly.
And that isn't there aren't many Germans on the Discord, right?
I don't know.
I don't think so, right?
3 or 4.
Yeah,
maybe.
So there is it's not the same in the English-speaking world, where there's probably most of the views. It's just a different encounter with that, and so yeah.
Yeah, I think there's about 7-8 people on Discord who speak German, but that's it. Yeah, and. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, all I can say is good luck with it. I hope you can pull it off. No, I mean that honestly. I mean, it sounds you've thought it through. You know what you want to try. You're not going to back down when it fails like I did.
Let's see. We have to prove that. But
it's going to be easier once COVID's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's.
That's also, not only because of COVID, but I think I also want to start small, not invite too much people.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say I would take my 2 brothers. I love them dearly, but as soon as I bring up epistemology, they're out the door. So.
Really? Kidding?
So, I mean, let's say I would ask my 2 brothers, so, hey, bros, let's talk about this. What really happens when you lie? And they'd be like, get the fuck out of here, It's just, well, why would you? But again, you got to find those people who are willing to engage with that. And I think that's what Peterson did to a lot of us. He kind of, pokes you in the chest, hey, you haven't thought about this properly. And we're like, yeah, I just been kind of zombieing through life, and I ignored these things that were right in front of me. And I don't think that works for everybody. A bunch of us are like, yeah, whatever, grandpa, go, leave me alone. But yeah, I don't think I can say.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
As somebody who's not as involved in the Discord, I hear more. I get it mostly through Matthias. And what keeps you coming back to the online community? What's you encountered Peterson a while ago, but what keeps you involved?
Conversations like this, for one. A sense of responsibility. There's always new people showing up. I have been there less, I notice. I used to be there all the time, all the day. I was the daily greeter, saying hi to everybody who showed up. That's gotten more difficult. Also because I used to be a freelancer, and nowadays I have a full-time job again. So I'm less flexible. But mainly there's a group of people here who I love dearly, who I've discussed difficult things with. A couple of months ago, my wife was pregnant, for instance, and I shared that with that group. It's like, hey, this is gonna. We never thought it could happen. So turns out, and so I was willing to share that with those people, because they say you shouldn't tell anyone if it's just that early. But I had to tell somebody. So these people are people who I can talk to about that. And then it turns into, okay, well, it's not okay. Oh, well, there seems to be a problem. And it turns out it was a miscarriage. But I got to share that with these people along the way. And that was just something, I thought I dealt with it pretty well, but it kind of still, kicked me down a couple notches later where, I was like, hey guys, I just want to crawl in a hole and die. And I need to stay talking to you, because that's all. That's the only light I have right now, is this group where I can just kind of at least speak what I'm feeling. And yeah, so if you're asking why do you keep coming back, I probably need those people more than they need me. And it's an absolutely wonderful place with lots of people with lots of different ideas from all sorts of backgrounds, and you just get to know each other better the longer you interact, and you get to share difficult things. And people have come to the Discord saying, hey, I'm dealing with this relation issue or this personal thing, and I'm just wondering how I should do that. And then people come and don't say, well, just fucking fix it, you whiner. It's like, no, hey, maybe you can try this, or well, how are you doing like this? And or just to say, hey, I'm sorry to hear that, So you kind of have this place where you can, sorry for defaulting to cliches, but you can know and be known. I think that's what makes it important. And it's not like I don't have people in my life who I can't share these things with, but it's difficult to say how it's different. Maybe it's just because they're farther away. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I haven't been open about my journey to religion as a pretty anti-theist over the last 2 years with people. Not that much, because I thought, well, part of me thought, oh, I can still get out. I'll be an atheist again in a couple months. You just watch. But it's yeah. Seriously, but it's easy to then to have a place where you can sort of just explore that without having to say, that, well,
act as if, right?
Sorry?
Like, it's like Peterson said, act as if thing. You can act as if God exists, or you can act as if and try things out.
Yeah, but not in a way that it's not genuine. I think it's extremely genuine and very, and I'm not saying you're saying it's not, but the Discord is special in the sense that people are willing to be very honest there. And I think that's because we sort of, maybe that's just the Vanderklay filtering system at work, that a certain kind of people ends up there. But when you say, hey, I've been struggling with this problem, then you tend to be taken seriously, and people engage with it in a well-meaning way. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think if you can to create that place offline where people can say, hey, like, I don't know, let's, if I had an offline place where I could just go and say, hey man, I've been really struggling with maybe the fact that I'll never be a father, or, I'm taking care of, like my wife and I are taking care of the 6-year-old kid. He comes over at our house every Wednesday afternoon, and okay, I go play soccer with him, and, draw and read a book, and like I wonder about it, like, am I doing that right? Hey, hey, fathers in the group, how did you deal when you became a dad, and what was the most difficult thing? I think that's that sort of discussion, if there's a place where that can be done and that can be engaged with in a in an honest kind of way. And then I ask myself, but those places already existed, right? Were those just bars? I don't know how to answer that. Like, did these places exist, or did we just kind of bottle that up? Or did we just not discuss it? Or did you just do that with your buddies at the barbecue in American suburbia?
I during my teenage years, I used to be hanging around in these I don't know, squatted houses and concert venues, and I played in bands and organized concerts and stuff like that. And then we also had this kind of community, you know, like really into punk rock and stuff like that. And of course, we also had some aspects of this community there, but I think in the end it wasn't on a stable fundament, you know. It was pretty nihilistic and pretty self-destructive, a lot of drugs and stuff like that. And I think if you really have this place where you can meet each other in real life, it's more of a mature thing, you know. It's also, I also think that's what church should be ideally. It's also not only for, I don't know, for a certain age group, you know, okay, we are cool and young and we are all together and we have a community, but if you're 50, you're out of our club because, you know, I think it's also, I don't know, church should also be it should be for children, for teenagers, for adults, for parents, for elders. And I also think, this should be reflected in some estuary kind of thing. And it's, that's what I always thought. It should be more mature, you know, than this superficial, okay, we have our bar here and we meet every time. And of course, there are aspects of this, but I think it should go deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's. I don't know where that was before we were trying to look for it. That's I think it's also a consequence of the way our society has changed and the way that we became more individualistic. That's a whole different discussion. Looking at the clock, that's why I'm saying it's a whole different discussion, because I'd love to have it, but it's getting late. But that also, I think it has to do with the fact that we used to be very much in closer knit communities, and we were either forced together through work or church. And I'm not saying that there wasn't, you know, that it wasn't all fun and games and people were just kind of work, you know, there were a lot of problems back then as well. But in the meantime, we sort of lost the place where we can come together and talk about these things that we otherwise just kind of winging. And
I think a good metaphor for that is, or a good practical experience. You talked a little bit about experience with miscarriages. I mean, being a parent today is very different than being a parent just a few generations ago. I mean, you are much more on your own. Not in terms of just time and resources, but you don't have that rich community around you that is giving you
wisdom
how to do
on your own.
It's a very different experience. And if that would be shed a little light on, like, that is quite dramatic than it was, you know, when my parents grew up in the kind of communities and how parenting would have taken place during that time period.
I bet. And it's changing faster and faster. That's also I'm dreading the day when that 6-year-old will suddenly have a smartphone. I'm like, you give that right here. I gotta go start winding down because it's getting kind of late. I would love to chat again if that's an option.
I also think it's a good point to stop for today. But yeah, we should continue this conversation. And thanks for having us, Job. So
lovely, my pleasure. I like what you're doing, and I love to hear about Matthias, what you're trying to do with the 12 Rules book.
Yeah,
and what you're trying to do with the community center, and I hope it works out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, us too. Yeah,
and of course, David, we'll see you in the Discord, because I don't know, you have an account, of course. You just learned.
I do. I've been officially welcomed in. You probably wrote.
I think when we release this on the Discord, I think you have to read the comments at least.
Then I have to read the comments. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna call it an evening.
All right.
Thanks for your time. Yeah.
Thanks for the chat. Have a great evening. Tschüss.
Bye, Job.
Bye.
Gute Nacht.
Ja, guten Abend.